you started doing some of this work at like 21 years old, and clearly the depth of your work it's really extraordinary. What caused you to start doing this in the first place?
I was an addict. I was addicted to opioids after a knee surgery just before I turned 15. Soccer was my coping mechanism from a really chaotic childhood. And when that got taken away, I just really went down a terrible rabbit hole. And I did inpatient rehab, outpatient rehab, AA meetings, NA meetings. Nothing really worked for me. I was in a psych class and somebody said to me, your conscious mind can't outwill or overpower your subconscious mind. When you're trying to get clean, you tell yourself every day, I'm going to not do this again. This is going to be the last time. This is going to be the last day. And then you go back and you repeat the same patterns over and over. I became obsessed with learning about the subconscious mind and the mind in general because I knew when somebody said the conscious mind can't outwill the subconscious mind, I was like, this explains this daily fight that I have with myself. That led me to sobriety after a lot of other things hadn't worked. And I realized, oh my gosh, I'm running from myself the whole time. That's what this is.
I think the application of her work is very, very broad in understanding human beings and how to affect them and how to connect with them, or understanding why you're not connecting with somebody.
I was somebody who went through life and had all these really mean thought patterns towards myself, beat myself up for everything. So of course I don't feel confident in my life during that time. So reprogramming those core ideas, I'm not good enough, I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable, that goes an extremely long way in terms of our self-confidence. When we have these deeply unmet needs, we outsource them. Somebody's anxiously attached and they need validation and reassurance, but they don't know how to validate or reassure themselves. Well, what do? They make that exclusively their partner's major responsibility. When that happens, somebody's not always going to be there. And so then we ride the roller coaster. Then when somebody does fill the bucket of reassurance, we're like, oh, I feel good. And then when they don't or they withdraw, we then feel terrible. And we're on this self-esteem roller coaster with all the ups and downs because we have no focal point of control. When we can actually learn what our needs are, start meeting them in ourselves, we fill our own cup halfway every day. And we go out into the world from a more rooted, grounded, centered space. And in combination of that, we also recondition these painful old fears that we have and negative beliefs about ourselves. It's like we clear the sludge out. And from that space, I feel like our light can really shine as individuals where we're grounded and present and available for what the world has before us.
This was so good. This was so extraordinary. So, hey guys, listen, we're all trying to get more productive. And the question is, how do you find a way to get an edge? I'm a big believer that if you're getting mentoring or you're in an environment that causes growth, a growth-based environment, that you're much more likely to grow and you're going to grow faster. And that's why I love Growth Day. Growth Day is an app that my friend Brendan Burchard has created that I'm a big fan of. Write this down, growthday.com/ed. So if you want to be more productive, by the way, he's asked me, I post videos in there every single Monday that get your day off to the right start. He's got about $5,000, $10,000 worth of courses that are in there that come with the app. Also, some of the top influencers in the world are all posting content in there on a regular basis, like having the Avengers of personal development and business in one app. And I'm honored that he asked me to be a part of it as well and contribute on a weekly basis, and I do. So go over there and get signed up. You're going to get a free, tuition-free voucher to go to an event with Brendan and myself and a bunch of other influencers as well. So you get a free event out of it also. So go to growthday.com/ed. That's growthday.com/ed. Welcome back to the show, everybody. I was just telling this lady that off camera that her work's really made a profound impact on me, even in the last few days of my life. Her name is Thais Gibson. Number one, I got to tell you that today's conversation will be different than most anyone we've ever had on the show before. She is the co-founder of the Personal Development School, but the reason she's here today is she's got a book out called Learning Love, and we're going to talk about attachment styles, the theory behind that, and a bunch of other stuff that I think is going to be new, groundbreaking information for so many of you. So Thais, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ed, for having me. I'm really grateful to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm grateful too. And Learning Love is an awesome book, everybody. Let's step back just for a second, and because tell us what attachment style is. We'll get into the 4 types in a minute. And then also where it comes from. I was really struck about this one parent thing that you talk about. So what is an attachment style in general, and where's it come from? And then we'll talk about what the ones are.
Perfect. So our attachment style is basically the subconscious set of rules that we've learned about how to give and receive love and really what to expect in relationships. And I often give people the analogy that if you have a different attachment style than somebody else, it's like sitting down to play a board game and you have the rules for Monopoly and I have the rules for Scrabble. Like,
Mm,
even if we want to have fun and play the game, we're just going to have unnecessary friction and confusion because we have different rules. So,
mm,
our attachment style, which, first of all, every single person has one,
mm,
is the set of rules that we've had for love. So, when we have different rules, it creates a lot of problems and challenges, but also, three of the four styles are insecurely attached, and that
mm,
makes for some difficult strategies and points of communication. So there's a
mm.
lot that we can really improve there and become securely attached, and that will help create a lot of transformation.
Isn't there the theory, or your theory is that it comes from some sort of dynamic with one of your parents primarily? Am I right about that? Am I
That's
getting that?
exactly correct. So,
Okay.
so basically, you learn how to give and receive love through your parents as a whole. Like, those are our first subconscious programs we develop in regards to what love looks like, how our needs are met, how our emotions should be treated, how we should be spoken to in relationships. All of that is modeled to us at a very young age. And the three
Mm,
ways we really pick up programming from a very young age are what we see repetitively or what's modeled to us, what we hear repeatedly, and what our firsthand experiences are. So
mm.
those relationships we have with our caregivers as children really form that strong foundation for exactly how we expect love and relationships to go in our adult life.
See, I told you off camera, I think the reason your work is so profound, and this conversation today will be, everybody, is self-awareness is such a powerful tool to have in your life. And by the way, my favorite people that I like to have around me, I think have a heightened self-awareness. They've done some work on that. But the reason this works contextually, what we're about to cover, everybody, is you're really going to begin to understand yourself so well, and why you feel or don't feel loved when you're in a relationship. And it could be an intimate relationship or a friendship. And and then also how to give it to the right person at the same time so that they can feel it. I've often said on the show, not often, I've said a couple times, that I think I'm, and this is a confession that was, I don't know, painful to admit, but in my case, I think I'm pretty good at giving love to other people. I think in my life I've been pretty good to my friends and family, but I have struggled to allow myself the gift of feeling it.
Yeah.
And I want to more. And I think the last few years that's improved to some extent. But you nodded when I said that. Do you hear that often, or do you relate to that?
I knew the moment you shared about your childhood. So as I had mentioned to you off camera, I had seen some of your videos before doing
Mhm.
speaker training. And
Right.
actually, one I listened to was a beautiful story about having a parent who was an alcoholic. And
Mhm.
basically, that's most likely to create a fearful avoidant attachment style. And
Mm.
fearful avoidants are renowned. This is actually what I was as well before doing the work. Fearful avoidants are renowned for being very loving, very giving, show up 10 out of 10 for people in times of crisis, emergency, really good at rolling with the punches, very resilient, but also actually have a hard time truly being vulnerable about the things that are deeply vulnerable to them, specifically relying on people, letting people in deeply, feeling like they can really trust that somebody will always be there for them. And so it's like you overgive and under receive, and that's very fearful avoidance. So as soon as you said that, I was like, that probably would be par for the course. So that's why I
Oh,
nodded.
no, and you're right. I started to read your work. I'm like, yep, that one's me. And by the way, one thing she says, we're going to go through it now too, that I love is this isn't necessarily a static thing either. And so just it's so great. So let's take our time on this, because I think just this right here, if someone could understand themselves or others, is an invaluable lesson that will actually could alter the direction of your life and the bliss that you feel in your life, the joy, the love that you feel. So what are the four attachment styles? And take your time on each one. And if you want to describe the behaviors that go with them, because that's what helped me, the
Definitely.
style and then the behaviors, I think everybody right now, if you're driving, you're going to want to probably go back and listen to this again, because you're gonna want to write this down.
Okay, perfect. So the first of four is our securely attached style. And this is the one that we ideally want to become. Because as
Mhm.
you just mentioned, our attachment style, it's not like a personality disorder or a diagnosis. It's basically just a set of programs that you have about love. So this is something
Mhm.
we can change. Now, the securely attached style gets a lot of what we call approach-oriented behaviors in childhood. And approach-oriented behavior psychologically means that when a child cries or expresses emotion, caregivers go towards that child and they are very attuned, very present. They are able to try to soothe the child. I know that sounds like it might be a small thing, but it
Mhm.
actually has a massive impact, because what a child learns growing up in this kind of environment is it's safe to express emotion. It's safe to rely on other people. My needs are worthy of being met and listened to, and I can really trust other individuals to look out for me, to take care of me. So
Mm,
securely attached individuals grow up to essentially have really healthy modeling and skills for relationships.
mm,
And as a result, statistically, they report being in the longest lasting relationships. But I'm sure we can both agree that that's not what we would call a thriving relationship per se. Securely attached individuals also report being happiest in their relationships. They report actually feeling really happy and fulfilled by their romantic partner.
okay.
So that's our securely attached style.
Mm,
There are three insecurely attached styles. At one end of the continuum, in a sense, there's the anxious attachment style. Now,
okay.
the anxious individual grows up with a lot of inconsistency in childhood, but often loving and fairly present caregivers when they are with that parent.
Okay.
So generally what you'll see is an anxious attachment style may have love and very caring parents, but perhaps they work a lot. So it's like love is there, love is taken away. Love is
Okay.
there, love is taken away. Now, neuroplastically, we get conditioned through repetition and emotion. So this will fire and wire these deep-rooted fears of, okay, love keeps getting taken away. Am I going to be abandoned?
Does this happen with divorced parents too, where you go to one loving parent to another loving parent, or would that be different?
That would be an exact example. So I'm
Okay.
just giving it one example, but that could be
Okay.
one. It could also be that we have a very loving parent, but another parent who's much more inconsistent or a little bit withdrawn. So the juxtaposition of love there, love
Mm,
not really there in the same way. All of
mm,
those things would create the consistency of inconsistency, which is that
okay.
overarching theme that will create an anxious attachment style. So anxious attachment styles then grow up to have these big core wounds in relationships. They fear being abandoned, alone, rejected, disliked, excluded, and they basically cope with these fears by trying to maintain proximity. So your anxious attacher is often the person who will call repeatedly, text many, many times, move very fast in relationships, really derive a lot of their sense of self-esteem and self-confidence through their relationships
Mm,
rather than through a relationship with self. And they often will get caught people pleasing a lot, sometimes be boundaryless in relationships. And of course, unfortunately, a lot of these things become self-fulfilling prophecies. So because they hold on so tightly, they often accidentally push people away, and exactly what they're afraid of usually comes to fruition.
mm. I can hear millions of people nodding their heads right now, thinking about themselves. Starting to explain yourself to you, didn't you? If you were in that category, everybody. Okay, please keep going. I just think this is just so good.
Thank you. And at the other end of the continuum is the dismissive avoidant attachment style.
Okay.
So they're very much the opposite of the anxious in many different ways. The dismissive avoidance overarching theme from childhood is childhood emotional neglect. Now, I think when a lot of us think of neglect, we think of like the child's left in the corner, there's no food on the table. Oftentimes, I would say 95% plus of the time, it's very covert neglect. It's things like having, parents in the household, there's structure, there's stability, food's on the table, kids are at school on time. But if you express an emotion, go in the other room, come back when you're done crying. Or
Mm,
don't be a crybaby, or that's embarrassing. Don't cry in front of other people. Hold it together.
mm,
And the constant messaging, which creates that programming, that repetition and emotion that fires and wires those neural pathways, that constant programming or messaging the child receives is your emotions, they're dysfunctional, they're defective. We don't really want them here.
mm,
Because a child is wired for attunement, all of us biologically are wired for attunement and closeness. A child doesn't know how to make sense of that experience. And they don't go, oh, my parent's emotionally unavailable, because they can't conceive of that yet. So
mm,
they go, there must be something wrong with me. This
mm,
part of me must be defective and shameful and wrong at the core because it just constantly gets rejected.
mm,
So they cope or adapt to that kind of experience by going, okay, I am literally going to just keep myself very distant from people emotionally, never open up, never allow myself to get seen or
mm,
feel too much or feel anything too real.
mm,
Now, as adults, the dismissive avoidant ends up often being in a relationship. Things are good early on, and as soon as things feel too serious, they often drop out, leave very
mm,
abruptly. Sometimes, blindside somebody, and their big core fears in relationships are I'm defective, something's wrong with me at my core. So they're very sensitive to criticism, even though they're very stoic and most people would never know. And
Yeah.
they also feel afraid of being unsafe emotionally if they're too open, afraid of being weak, disrespected, not capable if they're vulnerable. They have a lot of these deep wounds. And so they often are individuals who struggle a lot with commitment, with settling into relationships, and with wanting to really let people in and allow themselves to be seen much at all.
So, hey guys, I want to jump in here for a second and talk about change and growth. And, by the way, it's no secret how people get ahead in life or how they grow. And also taking a look at the future. If you want to change your future, you got to change the things you're doing. If you continue to do the same things, you're probably going to produce the same results. But if you get into a new environment where you're learning new things and you're around other people that are growth oriented, you're much more likely to do that yourself. And that's why I love Growth Day. Write this down for a second. growthday.com/ed. My friend Brendan Bouchard has created the most incredible personal development and business app that I've ever seen in my life. Everything from goal setting software to personal accountability, journaling, courses, thousands of dollars worth of courses in there as well. I create content in there on Mondays where I contribute, as do a whole bunch of other influencers, like the Avengers of influencers and business minds in there. It's the Netflix for high achievers or people that want to be high achievers. So go check it out. My friend Brennan's made it very affordable, very easy to get involved. Go to growthday.com/ed. That's growthday.com/ed. So good. I'm just thinking of somebody that I know very well right now. So what's great about the way you describe the attachment styles is that everybody right now is either so far thought of themselves or a very close friend they know that fit one of these attachment styles. I just want to say one thing too before we get to the last one or the next one. I know that the nature of your work, everybody listening to this, is sort of romantic relationships, but I have to tell you all, when I read this, I actually have thought about friendships that I've had. I actually think about business and leading people and understanding the way in which they respond or won't respond. I think the application of her work is very, very broad in understanding human beings and how to affect them and how to connect with them, or understanding why you're not connecting with somebody. So, but anyway,
Thank
continue,
you.
please.
And to your point, I couldn't agree more. This is because our relationships, it's primarily first a relationship to ourselves. So
Hmm.
that goes with us everywhere. But you'll see these patterns popping up absolutely in the workplace,
Hmm.
with friendships, family, everything. So
Hmm.
so the last attachment style, this is what I was, and I'm sure this is probably what you are from the sound of it, or
Hmm.
were. But basically the last attachment style is called fearful avoidant. And sometimes it's referred to as disorganized attachment style. And basically,
Okay.
often the example I actually give for what will form a disorganized attachment style would be an example of somebody having a parent who's an addict or an alcoholic. It
Mm.
can also be things like having a really bad divorce and being parentified. That was a lot of my experience. Parents went through
Okay.
this sort of 15-year divorce. I was always in the middle of it at a young age, lots of chaos, lots of really big fights happening my whole childhood. But basically what this is creating in terms of programming is I never know what I'm going to get. Sometimes I have these positive experiences with love, where sometimes love is safe and it's okay and I yearn for it. And so I care about love and I want to connect. But
Hmm.
other times love is scary, unpredictable, has moments of cruelty perhaps. And so what happens with a fearful avoidant in their childhood is they learn to have these basically extreme competing associations about love that are on opposite ends of the spectrum. I want love, and it can be really scary. Love can be
Mm.
beautiful sometimes, terrifying others. And so what happens for a fearful avoidant attachment style is growing up in an environment that's really unstable, unpredictable, chaotic. They basically learn I have this anxious side, and they share in the feelings of the anxious attachment style. They can fear abandonment. They can fear being rejected or not good enough, but they also share in the avoidance side. They fear being too close, being trapped, helpless, powerless in the wrong situation. And so fearful avoidants basically are very hot and cold in relationships. They're kind of pinballing back and forth. And
Mm.
for me, as an example, I grew up feeling like I wanted to be close to people. I would be very loving and generous and giving. And then when people would get too close, I would be like, get back.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the fearful avoidant flip-flops back and forth. And a lot of this is because of those deep inner wired programs from childhood of, okay, love is good, but love is also scary. And it
Mhm.
can create a lot of that sort of internal push-pull and confusion, which of course often shows up in external relationships as a result.
It's so great. I have, everybody, we're talking a lot about childhood here. And the more and more I've been doing the work I do the last 25 or 30 years, the more I realize like the vast majority of the work we're all doing is connected to our childhood. Like just the vast majority of our work is those, I don't know, those years where, are from infancy to 10, 12, 15 years old and beyond, even to the teenage years. And I think the more you dive into that work, the more you are going to be an effective parent, an effective human, an effective friend, effective business person. You say in the book, 95% of your thoughts and behaviors originate in your subconscious mind. And so basically our lives are sort of on this auto kind of pilot program. And then you also talk about the subconscious reality lens. I'm just curious as to what that term, I think I know, but not everyone's read the book. So what does that mean, and why does it matter that we have an appreciation or understanding of that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we all see reality through a filter of our past, right? So I often give the example that somebody could have the exact same external experience. We could take, for example, an anxious attachment style and a dismissive, who's the
Yeah.
more avoidant one. And they could both be dating, let's say, somebody who doesn't call them back. Well, the anxious attachment style, because we see through the filter of our past programming, it's really the lens that we see and interact with the world through, they're probably going to make it mean I'm about to be abandoned because that's their past experience. Those are the conclusions the mind will jump to. Whereas a dismissive avoidant attachment style, they're probably going to make it mean I'm free. I don't have to talk on the phone because they
Mm,
often fear too much vulnerability, too much closeness. So, we never really have these objective points of view. We're all living through this subjective worldview that's first being conditioned by and wired in by our pre-existing programs from childhood. Now, one thing that's really important to recognize is that our mind is also wired from a survivalistic perspective to hang on to negative things much more than positive things.
mm,
If you are walking through a forest tomorrow and you see a bear and you run away and you're safe, but tomorrow, the following day, you have to go back through the same path, you don't think, oh, yesterday I saw such a pretty tree next to the bear and there was such a pretty flower on the floor. You remember the bear and its teeth. So
mm,
we're wired to hang on to more negative experiences, especially when they impact us emotionally, because we think that by holding on, we then have a better chance to protect ourselves from them, which
mm.
is why we hold on to our negative experiences from childhood. And then to keep ourselves safe, although it doesn't happen emotionally, we constantly reproject them back out onto our external world. We'll jump to those conclusions, we'll assume those same patterns will happen with other people in relationships. And that's often the actual place that we end up sabotaging relationships from if we have unresolved childhood attachment challenges from a younger age.
I think you also repeat those patterns to stay consistent with yourself. In other words, if I don't consistently do this, I'm somehow not being the me that I'm familiar with, and that's a scary change in and of itself. Do you agree with that?
There's a lot of research to back this. I actually talk about
Yeah.
this all the time. I couldn't agree
Mhm,
more. Our subconscious mind works very hard to maintain its comfort zone because to
mhm,
your point,
mhm,
it says, well, what's familiar is safe and thus I'm more likely to survive. And
mhm,
and something that's so interesting is you'll see when people meet each other. So our conscious mind takes up to about 40 to 60 bits per second of data.
mhm.
And our subconscious and unconscious collectively take up to 1 billion bits per second of data. So we may meet somebody and be like, we're picking up all this web of information about their micro expressions, their body language, their tone of voice, how long they maintain eye contact for. And people are often choosing people who will mirror back to them their childhood as well, because that's what's most familiar. So if you look at
Yes.
an anxious attachment style, they're so externally focused, they're so people pleasing everybody else, they're dismissing and avoiding themselves. So guess
Mm,
who we often choose? People
mm,
who mirror back to us the relationship to self first, because that's what's most familiar and thus most safe. And so
mhm.
anxious attachment styles will often choose emotionally unavailable people. Hence, that cycle will continue for their likelihood of being abandoned.
Outstanding. I'm thinking of one of the other applications I want to ask you about. So, 'cause I obviously you're in a romantic or intimate relationship with somebody. One of the things I was thinking about this reading this yesterday. One of the main questions I get, and I bet you get too, is people that are in relationships together, um, they'll say, "How do I get my spouse, my boyfriend, or my girlfriend to support my dream or this change I want to make?" And I started reading these different attachment styles, and I'm like, boy, if you could really have an understanding of the attachment style of your partner, that would certainly help you understand how to help them support your dream, help them support this business you want to start. Do you agree with that? Like if you've got an abandonment issue and somebody says, I'm going to start a business or start to pursue a dream, I have to think part of their thinking is if you're successful, you're going to leave me. If we just stay the way that we are, you'll never leave me. And so one of their real fears is, well, if you start to win and change and grow, you're going to leave me. And so if I knew that, I would think if I was in a relationship with that person, I would want to be overly reassuring that I'm going to stay, that I'm going to be here, that we're going to build this dream together, that I'm doing this for us. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you agree with that?
100%. So a big part of what we focus on actually in this work, and people hear it in the book too, is again, to your point,
Mhm.
it's that each attachment style not only has these core fears, but they also have these core needs.
Okay.
And if you imagine, if you've ever heard of the work of Dr. Gary Chapman, Dr. Gary
Mhm.
Chapman talks about the five love languages, and he
Yes.
says, okay, they are words of affirmation, physical touch, quality time, acts of service, and gifts. Now,
Mhm.
I would make a very strong argument that our needs are much more impactful than love languages, because for me, I, for example, have a huge quality time need or
Mhm.
love language. But if I sit down and I watch Netflix with somebody for an hour, that's going to be way different than having like a deep conversation with somebody,
Great
because
point.
that meets the need for emotional connection, for authenticity. And
Mhm.
so, our needs, in my opinion, have a much greater impact on the ways that we give and receive love in relationships. And what
Mhm.
happens is each unique attachment style has different needs. So, anxious attachment styles, they need, exactly like you said, they need more reassurance, they need more validation, encouragement, certainty,
Mhm.
consistency. Dismissive avoidance, they need more freedom, autonomy, independence, but they also actually really need empathy, support, and acceptance, as well as
Mhm.
appreciation about small things. And fearful avoidance tend to need a lot of depth. They need novelty, exploration, they need growth. They also want, this intimate connection and closeness, but they also want their freedom and independence because they sort of
Mhm.
share in both sides of that attachment continuum. So I always tell people, like, if we had like a prescription for relationships, it would be know each other's needs in relationships. And then when we go through these big life changes or transformation, like you're building something, you're creating something, rather than somebody having to be like, oh no, I want to stay familiar and safe, and accidentally sabotaging the
Mhm.
relationship as a result, or having these protest behaviors or ways of acting out. It's like, well, if you know your partner's needs, when we go through big change, just pour into each other's needs during those times, and it will
Mhm.
strengthen the relationship and also ensure that you're growing together rather than growing apart.
So good. I was thinking, uh, I'm thinking about a lot of different things, but one of them is, you know, when you're understanding these attachment styles, your own and that of your partner, helps you understand where resistance can be coming from. So oftentimes, what's the resistance that I'm getting from them? Why don't they want me to start this business? Why is it they don't want me to go do this? And now you might have a deeper understanding of the reasoning behind, not only their behaviors, but if you understand their behaviors and their needs, you understand where this resistance is coming from. I wrote a term down just because I didn't understand if it was different than what I was reading. So this is just for my edification. What is integrated attachment theory? Hey guys, your metabolism is so critical because your metabolism is at the center of everything going on in your body. Optimal metabolic health is critical because it's involved in everything you do. It improves your energy levels, it has weight loss and management benefits, better fitness results, better sleep. So metabolism matters so much. That's why I love Lumen. It's a device that can help measure your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it'll let you know, it'll detect whether you're burning for fat or carbs in that moment, gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, your workouts, your sleep, and even stress management. It's really a brilliant idea, and now I don't know what I would do without it. So if you want to take the next step in helping to improve your wellness, go to lumen.me/edmylett to get 15% off your Lumen. That is Lumen, lumen.me/edmylett for 15% off your purchase. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. These statements and products have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease or condition. So, there's a lot of people out there right now learning about the benefits of fasting, like weight loss, obviously the mental and physical performance, and gut health, but worry about the whole, not eating part. Well, that's exactly why Prolon was created. The good thing about it is Prolon is not a diet. It's actually science. It's science based on internationally recognized discoveries in medicine. And it all starts with Prolon's 5-day program. You get snacks, soups, and beverages, all designed to keep your body in a fasting state. But unlike anything you've ever experienced before, your body believes it's fasting and conducts itself as if it were fasting. Right now, Prolon is offering the Ed Mylett Show listeners 15% off their 5-day nutrition program. So go to prolonlife.com/Mylett. So that's Prolon, PROLON life.com/Mylett for this special offer. That's prolonlife.com/Mylett. These statements and products have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any diseases or condition.
So integrated attachment theory is the science of how we can actually change to become securely attached. We're not stuck with our attachment style. So
Okay.
it's actually the study of these 5 major places that we can do the work at a subconscious level so that we can become secure and have like the strengths that came out of having an insecure attachment style, because there are strengths. We become resilient, resourceful, more empathetic, more compassionate in a lot of ways, but also have wired in those healthy patterns of secure attachment.
Can you elaborate on what some of those places are,
Yes. So
please?
the first one is we have to reprogram core fears. So we all have these core fears, like we've talked about the abandonment or the fear of being trapped or defective or criticized. And so we can actually, that we're not born with those fears. We can recondition them through leveraging the science of neuroplasticity. So repetition and emotion fires and wires new ideas. And it's not through something like affirmations. I'll sort of go down a rabbit hole here just
Yeah,
briefly,
please.
but
I'm
a lot of people will try to do affirmations. So let's say somebody, for example, has a core fear, I'm not good enough.
Mhm,
You're not going to really help yourself by saying, I'm good enough, I'm good enough, I'm good enough. I think it's a
mhm,
little bit futile. And the reason is because your conscious mind speaks language. If I
mhm.
say to you, Ed, whatever you do, do not think of a chocolate chip cookie.
Right. Yep.
How
Yep.
did that go?
Right.
So, so what happens is your conscious mind hears do not, but your subconscious actually speaks in emotion and in images. So nobody's waking up intentionally having these core fears. Nobody's saying, oh, I'm going to tell myself I'm not good enough 47 times today and hope that I feel good.
Right.
What's actually happening is these are subconscious pre-existing programs. So we have to speak to the subconscious mind to solve for them. So what I give people as an original tool to recondition these core fears that really are the big saboteurs of our relationships. I'll be abandoned. I'm not good enough. I'll be alone forever. These huge things that wreak havoc on our life and relationships is we start by number 1, identifying the core fear and its opposite. Very simple. I'm not good enough. I am good enough. Number 2, we need 10 pieces of memory of times we did feel good enough. And
Mm,
the reason we have memory and the reason we pick 10 is because we need repetition for firing and wiring.
mm,
And memory is just container for emotions and images. If somebody recounts their favorite childhood memory, maybe it's them playing on the playground, what do you see? The
mm,
images of the slide. As you
mm,
tell the story, you smile, your body language shifts and changes. So now we're using our conscious mind to speak to our subconscious mind. Step 3, we record it for 20 and listen back to it for 21 days because it takes about 21 days to fire and wire these new strong neural pathways. And as long as we have like 10 pieces of proof for how we feel good enough or why we're worthy of connection instead of abandonment, or we're lovable instead of unlovable, or whatever the core wound is that we're targeting, 10 pieces of evidence, listen back for 21 days, we will actually rewire these ideas that we've carried about ourselves and relationships for very long periods of time. So that's the first one. So is reprogramming these core fears. And I'm sure anybody listening, if they're like, oh, 21 days, it feels like a lot, I would really encourage anybody listening to think of how many times that core fear has actually sabotaged your relationships. And it will always be more work not to do the work. It's a
yeah,
lot to have to live like that.
yeah, you built those neural pathways probably doing it for 21 years. You can spend 21 days trying to undo it.
Exactly,
100%.
exactly.
Right.
And it only takes like 5 minutes as a morning
Mhm,
routine or
mhm,
something. It's very simple. So,
mhm,
so the second one is we need to learn our own needs. And so, I mentioned those earlier. For some
mhm.
people, they need the reassurance, the
Yes.
validation, the certainty. For other people, they need the autonomy, the acknowledgement, the independence. So when we can go back and actually see what our needs are according to our attachment style, we actually first have to learn to meet them ourselves. There's a great quote from Dr. Gabor Mate, and he says, trauma are the things that happen that shouldn't have happened. Okay, so let's say verbal abuse, for example, which would maybe cause somebody to feel I am not good enough, and we have those core fears. But it's also the things that didn't happen that should have happened. So this could be if somebody gets neglected growing up, we're wired for attunement. So we will have these deeply unmet needs that come from trauma, whether it's small t trauma or big T trauma. And because of the subconscious comfort zone, because we want to keep that subconscious comfort zone alive in the relationship to self, we keep those needs unmet in our own lives first.
Wow. That's good. Yeah.
So you'll see, like dismissive avoidance, they're neglected. And what do? They grow up and they neglect their own emotions. And
Mm,
so, we see this time and time again for each person. So our step 2 is after we reprogram core fears, number 2, we learn to meet our own needs. In doing this, if we can show up and meet a need that's deeply unmet every day for 21 days, we actually will change that within ourselves. And then what will happen is we will be attracted to the right people who will mirror that back to us.
mm,
Because our point of familiarity, our own subconscious comfort zone has now shifted. So we don't keep attracting those old patterns, those old people who will keep, that self-fulfilling prophecy alive. So that's really step 2, identify your deeply unmet needs, meet them in relationship to self for 21 days. Step 3, very simple, a little nervous system regulation, because every insecure attachment style is often sitting too much in fight or flight or parasympathetic nervous system mode. So a little breath work in the evening or a little meditation on a daily basis, just something for 20 minutes a day to help recondition our body so it follows our subconscious mind
mm,
into feeling like it is safe to be in our body, it is safe to be more present with ourselves. And again, it tends to come full circle in giving to ourselves those deeply unmet needs.
mm.
Now, those first 3 steps, I like to think of as being in relationship to self. Okay, I'm doing the work
Okay.
on me first. I'm removing my core fears.
Right.
I'm meeting my own needs. I'm regulating my nervous system. The second ones are out into relationship with others, because healthy interdependency means I'm a master of the relationship to myself, and I am a master at being able to relate to, rely on, and be vulnerable with others. It's
Mm,
not one or the other.
okay.
And so our second 2 steps are communicating our needs to others and allowing ourselves to receive them, and
Mm,
having healthy boundaries so we can show and share our true selves with other people. I
mm,
often say to people when it comes to boundaries, when people don't set boundaries, they're like, no, boundaries are off. They're like a separation instead of a joining. But
mm,
a boundary is you sharing the no's in your life. If you're not connecting fully or truthfully by just sharing all the things you do like or that are great.
mm,
You also have to say, hey, I don't like when this happens. Hey, I don't like these things, because that's you sharing without your mask. And so if we can do these 5 major things and really connect in a real honest way with ourselves first and then with others, that's how we move the needle from insecure to securely attached in a fairly short period of time. And it will transform the relationship we have to ourselves and the relationships in all aspects of our lives.
this is so good. A basic question. You cover it in the book. By the way, thank you for this. It's just,
Thank you.
I love real work that really makes a difference and really changes people. How do our emotions affect our actions? I know that's a general question, but it's actually part of the book as well. And I don't think most people step back and look at that, that not only the state you're in, but the emotional state you're in and how it's impacting the action. And I know that's a broad question compared to the very specific place we just went. But I think when we get really granular like we just did, it's time to kind of go to concept for a second as well to understand why that matters. So how do emotions affect behavior?
Amazing question. So, a neuroscientist named Antonio Damasio, I believe it was in 2008, actually discovered conclusively that every single action we take or decision we make is based on our emotional state.
Mm,
So, some people are very quick to rationalize or justify through logic. They're like, I'm
mm,
a logical thinker. I only make logical decisions. But the reality is, at the tipping point, you're making an emotionally based decision, and then you're just quick to then rationalize it through logic.
mm,
And so, if we are not in control of how we feel, then we are not in control of the decisions that we're making.
mm,
And I would make a really strong argument that when we go back to this topic of core fears, I often give people this acronym of BTEA, which is our belief patterns will create patterns of thought, which then will create emotions, and then actions will
mm,
follow. So if I, for example, let's pretend I have this core wound, I'm not good enough. Well, I might start thinking thoughts like I'm not interesting enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not pretty enough, whatever it is, fill in the blanks enough.
mm,
And then what will happen is, how will I feel or emote according to that? Will I feel insecure or afraid or sad? And then we all go into our actions or coping mechanisms, right? We're not even in charge. When somebody's feeling that way, what do? Do they go to their fridge and eat a whole bunch of junk food? Do they
mm,
withdraw from the world and go into their shell? Do
mm.
they become really big and tell everybody how amazing they are to try to overcompensate, but it feels arrogant? So really, if we're not being able to reprogram and identify these core beliefs or these old fears or wounds, then we're going to have havoc wreaked on our thought patterns throughout the day. Our emotional state we're not in charge of, and then our actions we're not even in charge of either. And when we go and change and recondition these old stories or belief patterns, everything else will follow. How we think, how we feel about ourselves, and even our actions and behaviors will become healthier.
So good. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp, and I'm grateful that it is. I got to tell you, I get asked all the time, what's the one thing that most of the guests that have been on this show have in common? I can tell you, they're all from different backgrounds. Some of them are tall, some of them are short, some of them are from the US, some of them are from abroad, different ethnic backgrounds, religious backgrounds, you name it. But I got to tell you, most of them have been to therapy. And I'm a big believer in therapy. I think that whether you've got some real trauma you got to work through in your life, or, you just got a problem you want to work on right now, maybe you just want to talk out loud about some issues you got or find a better quality of emotions. Big believer in therapy, and I love BetterHelp. I love BetterHelp because number one, it's done online. Number two, if you get a therapist, you don't vibe with them, you can switch at any given time that you want to. It's a wonderful way to go to therapy, and I really believe it can help you if you have things that you want help with. So decide today you're going to give BetterHelp a shot and stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/edshow today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/edshow. I think of energy when you say that, and you talk about, I never heard this before, black cat versus golden retriever energy, right? What is, I know what that is now, but just share what that means for everybody, because I think also how we feel is our ability to sense and give energy, and the energy that we put out as well.
Yeah, so this was like a trending. I actually spoke about this because it was trending all over
Yeah,
TikTok and the internet. And
yeah,
my take on it, honestly, was neither is right. People were saying, don't be the golden retriever. The golden retriever
right.
is sort of the one that's like always open, always trying, always giving, making the effort, sort of the
Yeah,
anxious attacher, right? The people
yes,
pleaser. And the
yes.
black cat is like the avoidant, stay away, kind of mysterious, withdrawn. And the whole internet's going, don't be the golden retriever, be the black cat. And I was saying, well, this is just reinforcing, telling people they should be a dismissive avoidant attachment style. What we actually
Mhm,
want to do is be interdependent, which means I can show up for myself in relationship to myself, and I can be there for other people too. And when we master both sides of it, that's secure attachment and secure connection. And that's when we have thriving relationships. There's also a lot of information out there in the world too, which I respect where it's coming from, but it's like, women should only ever have their full feminine energy. Men should only be fully in their masculine energy. Polarity in dating is really meaningful. Okay. There's three things that drive attraction at the subconscious level. These are like actually how we become attracted to people, besides like physical features and biology, right?
mhm,
So we have number one, somebody who meets your deeply unmet needs from childhood.
mhm,
Let's say that somebody felt very unseen as a child, and then somebody is like, really present with them. That's going to cause us to feel like, wow, I really want to be connected to this person. The second is somebody who expresses your repressed trait. Okay. If somebody's really assertive and
mhm,
I'm not assertive, that might be really attractive, for example, right? So,
mhm,
so that's a big part of what creates attraction. The third is your subconscious comfort zone in relationship to self. That's what you'll invest in the most. So we have this idea that like, okay, polarity is attraction. But have you ever noticed this before? Let's say, and this happened to me. I'll share a personal example. So my
mhm,
husband, super assertive, very, and I was kind of like over giving and not as assertive when I first met him.
mhm,
And I thought it was so attractive in the dating stage of relationships. We have multiple stages of relationships: dating, honeymoon, power struggle, stability, commitment, bliss. What we're attracted to in terms of polarity in the dating stage, when we get to the power struggle stage, will be the exact thing that often ruins or disrupts the relationship. So, dating stage is like, oh, he's so assertive, that's so attractive. Power struggle stage, it's like he never makes compromises. This is so frustrating.
mhm,
And so, what we're supposed to be doing, and you'll see this all the time, somebody's like, oh, they're so easygoing, that's so attractive. The power struggle stage comes along and they're like, they never make plans. This is so frustrating.
mhm.
So what we're supposed to be doing is actually integrating those traits and being whole. It's not
Okay.
supposed to be that that person's one way and I'm the exact opposite. That's attractive at the beginning, but
Mm,
as we progress for a relationship to work, we're actually supposed to take on sides of one another to become whole. And so this idea that like masculine energy only and feminine energy only, no, men need to also have that emotional side, be able to express, have that sort of connection in relationship to their own emotions. And women also need to have that ability to be assertive sometimes and set boundaries and have some of those masculine energy traits. In the wholeness, relationships last.
Can you go through those 6 stages again just quickly? Because you went through that really, really quickly. The 6
Yeah,
stages
sure.
again. No, I think
So
it's just I think everybody heard it and they're like, ask her that again." So I'm
I got
asking you.
excited for a moment to share
No,
this.
it's
So
awesome.
So there's the dating stage, which is sort of the vetting stage of relationships. It's the first 0 to 4 months. It's like, we're getting to know if we're a fit for each other,
Mhm,
asking the right questions. If we make a commitment to each other after that first few months, we move into the honeymoon stage where there's the rite of passage into commitment. And then in the honeymoon stage, we have the elevated neurochemistry of oxytocin and serotonin and dopamine and attraction neurochemicals that lasts for about a year to 2 years after the dating stage ends.
okay.
Then, as we start to get comfortable and we adapt to each other, the mask comes off. And it's the rite of passage going into the power struggle stage. Unfortunately, people often don't know that this exists. So the mask comes off, and we start sharing our fears, our flaws, our frustrations more easily with our partner. And often, this is where relationships break down. This is statistically where most relationships end. The rite of passage of the power struggle stage is to be more vulnerable and to share our fears and flaws with people and to accept and work through them together. And
Mm,
when we do this, we have the capacity to move the needle from more conditionally based love to more unconditionally based love
mm,
because we're showing ourselves finally without condition. Dating and
mm,
honeymoon, we usually are like on our best behavior a little bit still.
right.
Power struggle, it's like this is the real me. These are the innermost things that are going on. When we learn to navigate those with each other and take each other's fears or challenges into consideration, we move out of the power struggle into the
Mm,
stability stage, eventually the commitment stage and the bliss stage, which is like the honeymoon stage, but we know each other much more deeply.
mm,
And in that power struggle stage, for example, I know in the power struggle stage, just as an analogy, with my husband, he shared a lot about how he was sensitive to criticism. He was more dismissive avoidant when we first started dating.
mm,
And I was able to just be mindful and considerate of that, right? It's not like, oh, I have to be perfect all the time, but I would phrase things differently. Instead of saying, hey, you didn't do this, I'd be like, oh, hey, do you mind doing this?
mm.
And these little tiny things, we can consider each other more, support each other in that. And those are the ways that we deepen that connection. But unfortunately, most people constantly go through dating, honeymoon, power struggle, breakup. Dating, honeymoon, power struggle, breakup. And so
Yeah.
they think that relationships are either in this intoxicating love space or in this space of like, oh, everything's fighting and it's terrible and we'll break up and it just wasn't meant to be. But relationships in their life cycle are far beyond that. And when we deepen that connection and know each other more, we can really move the needle ahead.
What's a perceptual shift?
A perceptual shift is when we are able to really look outside of our own perspective, to really challenge and question things that we've been believing or attaching to as concepts for a long time.
Okay.
I used to personally, for example, think that everybody's going to betray you eventually. So relationships, just, what's the point of investing in them? But what I try to get people to do is be like, can I really know that that's true? Like, can I 100% know that? And to question these long-standing ideas and to poke at them, right? So I learned, well, actually, people may make mistakes, but real trust isn't earned through people being perfect. Real trust is earned through me when there's a mistake made, advocating for myself, letting somebody know that they hurt me and what I need for reparation, and that's strengthening the connection as a result. So our perceptual shift is really when we go from attaching to one original idea to being able to poke at it, try and do something differently, and really see a lot of that progress as a result.
I'm just listening to you. I got 2 more questions. By the way, I'm enjoying this thoroughly. And when I say that I have 2 more questions, please, like, take your time on both these because 'cause I'm interested. I wanna step out of your work for a minute and talk about you. So, I learned a little bit about you as we were getting ready that you started doing some of this work at, like, 21 years old, and you're still a very young woman, and clearly, the depth of your work is it's really extraordinary. What what caused you to do this? The reason I ask it is that I think anytime you observe somebody who's great at something and you want to be great in your life, I think success leaves clues. Like, how is it that she became so great at this so young? What caused you to start doing this in the first place?
Yeah, thank you. I was an addict. I was addicted to opioids after a knee surgery at just before I turned 15. I was a soccer player. I played D1 in university, but really just hung on by a thread there. But that soccer was my coping mechanism from a really chaotic childhood. And when that got taken away, I just really went down a terrible rabbit hole. And I did inpatient rehab, outpatient rehab, AA meetings, NA meetings. Nothing really worked for me. And I was like hanging on by a thread. I was still somewhat in school. I would go to rehab during the summers, and I was in a psych class, and somebody said to me, your conscious mind can't outwill or overpower your subconscious mind. And
Mhm.
as somebody, if anybody's had this experience, like when you're trying to get clean, you tell yourself every day, I'm going to not do this again. This is going to be the last time. This is going to be the last day. And then you go back and you repeat the same patterns over and over. And it's horrible. It's that to me was like one of the hardest things that I ever went through. And it
Mhm.
wasn't even like the traumas that caused the addiction to
Mhm.
begin with. And so for me, I became obsessed with learning about the subconscious mind and the mind in general, because I knew when somebody said the conscious mind can't outwill the subconscious mind, I was like, this explains this daily fight that I have with myself.
Mm.
So I got really into when I turned about 20. I got really into, I think it might have been right before I turned 20, obsessing over the subconscious mind. That led me to sobriety after a lot of other things hadn't worked. And I did a lot of work on my core wounds, my big core fears that were causing me to have really negative and often really cruel thoughts towards myself and to feel badly. And then I would numb, right, with opioids.
Mm.
That was like, and I realized, oh my gosh, I'm running from myself the whole time. That's what this is. So I did
Mm.
a ton of reconditioning of my subconscious wounds, learned my needs, learned to emotionally regulate, and just did a whole bunch of work deeply in myself. And then this is what, like 13 years ago. And nobody was talking about this stuff then, right? At
Mhm.
least in my experience, it was very
Yeah.
rare. So I started giving workshops for free and started, sharing and opening up and just telling people like, look, you can change your subconscious mind. And then eventually revisited relationships and attachment theory, and learned, okay, these things are very much interconnected in a very real way.
I'm fascinated, on my show. Not everybody, I can't say that this is everybody, but a lot of people struggle with finding their purpose. And I've been talking about this a lot on my stage speaking as well. And it's not everyone, but the vast majority of people that I've had on my show or that I know personally in my private life that have extraordinary work they do comes from some form of pain. Their purpose came through something painful. And I think that's the reason I asked you this was I didn't know why. And I think if you're listening to this or watching it today and you're saying, I haven't found my purpose yet, you might want to take a peek at painful parts of your life. You might want to take a peek there because somewhere in there, there was a lesson, a gift, a relationship, an emotion, or maybe a purpose that has come through that. I say all the time that, and it wasn't my saying, but oftentimes you're most qualified in life to help the person you used to be. And you were a bit broken, and you appear to me to be so extraordinary at helping people that are a little bit feel broken, at least, or broken relationships. And so just really fascinated by that. So everybody just hearing her story, I hope you all, relate to that. If you don't have your purpose yet, look somewhere maybe where there's been pain in your life. Okay. Having said all that, last question. It kind of steps a little bit out of the work, but you do talk about it in your work. And that is that I think most people in our culture today are struggling with their self-esteem overall, just their self-worth. And they bring that into these relationships in addition to their attachment styles. And it affects every area of their life. Lack of self-esteem, and even the reverse, an increase in self-esteem changes your external life, changes your emotions so often. And your work is so good. So I thought, I don't want to finish today by not asking you, do you have a hack, a strategy? I know you have multiple ones, but that you would share with us today to help somebody who says, I need to feel better about myself. I need to have more esteem.
Absolutely. I think it really boils down to these first two things is always where I would start. I don't think that true self-esteem is like arrogance. I think it's the absence of all of these core wounds, the absence of all of this negative internal dialogue that beats ourselves up. I think when we have the absence of those things, we are naturally more present. We're naturally able to feel confident and believe in ourselves for what we're going to do. And so I
Mm.
find that there's really two things that have a massive impact on our self-esteem as a whole. Number one, and this was big time my experience, is reprogramming those core fears using that tool we talked about, that auto suggestion to
Mhm.
speak to your subconscious, because I was somebody who went through life and had all these really mean thought patterns towards myself, beat myself up for everything. So of course I don't feel confident in my life during that time. And so reprogramming those core ideas, I'm not good enough, I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable, I'll be disliked, rejected, all these things, that goes an extremely long way in terms of our self-confidence. And the second one is when we learn to meet our unmet needs, because when we have these deeply unmet needs, and the subconscious mind is in a state of learned helplessness because we don't realize what they are consciously or how to meet them. What we do from learned helplessness is we outsource them. So let's say, for example, that somebody's anxiously attached and they need validation and reassurance, but they don't know how to validate or reassure themselves. Well, what do? They make that exclusively their partner's major responsibility. And when that happens, somebody's not always going to be there. And so then we ride the roller coaster. Then when somebody does fill the bucket of reassurance, we're like, oh, I feel good. And then when they don't or they withdraw, we then feel terrible. And we're on this self-esteem roller coaster with all the ups and downs because we have no focal point of control. And so when we can actually learn what our needs are, start meeting them in ourselves, we fill our own cup halfway every day. And we go out into the world from a more rooted, grounded, centered space. And if in combination of that, we also recondition these painful old fears that we have and negative beliefs about ourselves, it's like we clear the sludge out. And from that space, I feel like our light can really shine as individuals where we're grounded and present and available for what the world has before us.
This was so good. This was so extraordinary. This is Thais Gibson, everybody. Number one, her book is Learning Love. And I am really grateful that we did this today. I am really grateful. I just think your work's awesome. I think it's unique and I think it's needed. So very, very grateful for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful to be here with you. You're an absolute legend. So I'm so grateful that we got to have this conversation.
We're gonna do your stage speaking. We're gonna work on that together. So I'm excited.
I'm excited.
All right, everybody. Hey, share today's episode. This is one that I know is going to reverberate through the internet today. All right. God bless you, everybody. Max out.